The reservation confirmation email was addressed to Marcus Whitfield, table for two at Le Jardin Noir, 8 p.m. Friday. Anniversary special, champagne service included. I stared at my laptop screen, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Our anniversary wasn't until October, it was only March. And Marcus had told me he was working late on the Brennan project that Friday night.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Tell us a duh.
The woman sitting across from me at that intimate corner table would be Zara Blackwood, the brilliant archaeology professor whose parents had become like family to me after my mother's death. The same parents I'd be bringing as my guests to witness their daughter's betrayal firsthand. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I discovered that my husband's secret dinner was about to become the most unforgettable evening of his life. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been living what I thought was the perfect life in Portland's Pearl District. Marcus and I had been married for 8 years, together for 12. I ran the community outreach program at the Cascade Art Foundation, work that filled me with purpose and brought me into contact with some of the city's most respected academics and artists. Marcus owned Pinnacle Development Group, specializing in sustainable housing projects that had earned him recognition throughout Oregon. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. More importantly, we were happy, or so I believed. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Marcus had left early for a site inspection, kissing my forehead and promising to pick up groceries on his way home. I was catching up on emails when my laptop chimed with a new message notification. Gmail had automatically logged into Marcus's account instead of mine, something that happened occasionally since we shared the computer for household management. The subject line made my blood freeze. Reservation confirmation, Le Jardin Noir, anniversary package. Le Jardin Noir was the most exclusive French restaurant in Portland, the kind of place where reservations were booked months in advance, and dinner for two could easily cost more than our monthly grocery budget. Marcus and I had talked about celebrating our 10th anniversary there someday, but we'd never actually made plans. I opened the email with shaking hands. Table for two, Marcus Whitfield, Friday, March 15th at 8 p.m. Special anniversary champagne service, roses, and the chef's tasting menu. The kind of romantic evening I dreamed of sharing with my husband. Except Friday, March 15th wasn't our anniversary, and Marcus had already told me he'd be working late that night. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it was a surprise for us. Maybe he was planning something special and had lied about work to throw me off the scent. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Marcus was terrible at keeping surprises, and we'd never spent that kind of money on a spontaneous dinner. Plus, he'd been genuinely apologetic about working late, showing me his calendar packed with meetings that would keep him at the office until at least 10. I spent the rest of that morning in a haze, mechanically responding to emails and phone calls while my mind churned through possibilities. By lunch, I'd convinced myself there had to be an innocent explanation. Marcus was many things, but I'd never considered him capable of deception on this scale. Then I found the credit card statement. Hidden in a folder marked Business Expenses 2024 on our shared drive was a statement for a card I'd never seen before. American Express Platinum, Marcus Whitfield, account holder. The charges painted a picture that shattered every assumption I'd held about my marriage. February 8th, Tiffany & Co., $847. February 14th, the Meridian Grand Hotel, $395. February 21st, Bella Luna Spa, couples massage package, $290. March 3rd, Victoria's Secret, $156. March 8th, Wine Country Tours, private tasting for two, $425. Each charge was carefully timed for days when Marcus had told me he was traveling for business or working late on projects. The Valentine's Day hotel charge was particularly devastating. Marcus had spent our actual Valentine's evening at home with me, claiming he was too tired for anything elaborate, suggesting we order pizza and watch Netflix instead. I'd been disappointed but understanding, believing his work stress was temporary. Now I realized he'd been saving his energy and romance for someone else. My hands trembled as I scrolled through months of evidence. Restaurant charges at places I'd never been, hotel stays during his supposed business trips, purchases at boutiques that sold clothes in sizes I'd never worn. The financial breadcrumbs of an affair that had been flourishing while I'd been planning our future together. I spent Wednesday at the Cascade Art Foundation attempting to focus on grant applications for our summer youth program. The work that usually energized me felt distant and meaningless. During lunch, I found myself staring at my computer screen for 20 minutes without typing a single word, my mind cycling through the same questions on endless repeat. How long had this been going on? Had Zara been planning this from the beginning, or had it developed gradually during those family dinners where I'd welcomed her into our home? When Marcus laughed at her academic jokes or complimented her research, had I been witnessing the early stages of their affair? My colleague Priya Kapoor knocked on my office door around 3, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the concerned expression she reserved for serious conversations. "You look terrible," she said with characteristic directness, settling into the chair across from my desk. "What's wrong?" Priya had been my closest work friend for 5 years, a no-nonsense program coordinator who'd helped me navigate office politics and celebrated every small victory in our underfunded nonprofit world. If anyone deserved an honest answer, it was her. But the words wouldn't come. How do you explain that your marriage is built on lies? That the academic family you adore has produced a daughter who's systematically destroying your life? That you've discovered financial evidence of betrayal but haven't confronted the betrayer because you're not sure you can handle his response? "Just tired," I lied, accepting the coffee she offered. "Marcus has been working late, and I'm not sleeping well." Priya studied my face with the attention she usually reserved for budget discrepancies. "When was the last time you two went out together? Did something fun, just for yourselves?" The question hit like a physical blow. When had we last shared a romantic dinner, attended a concert, or taken a weekend trip together? I couldn't remember the last time Marcus had suggested we do something special, just the two of us. Meanwhile, according to his credit card statements, he'd been creating elaborate romantic experiences for Zara every few weeks. "We've both been busy," I said weakly. "Too busy for your marriage?" Priya's tone sharpened with disapproval. "Isabel, you're one of the most thoughtful, caring people I know. If Marcus isn't making time for you, maybe you need to have a serious conversation about priorities." If she only knew that Marcus was making time for romance, just not with me. That evening, I decided to test my sanity by looking for innocent explanations for what I'd discovered. Maybe the charges were legitimate business expenses poorly categorized. Maybe the hotel stays were actually work-related, and Marcus had been embarrassed about the luxury accommodations. Maybe Zara was genuinely providing archaeological consulting services for Pinnacle Development Group. I spent 2 hours researching Blackwood & Associates archaeological consulting online. The company existed, with a professional website showcasing their work on historical site assessments for development projects. Zara's credentials were impressive: PhD from University of Oregon, published research on Pacific Northwest indigenous settlements, 5 years experience consulting for construction companies navigating archaeological requirements. It was possible. Marcus's sustainable housing projects often involved land with historical significance. Maybe he'd hired Zara legitimately, and the regular payments were simply retainer fees for ongoing consultation. But then I found the project timeline that destroyed that fragile hope. Buried in Marcus's email folder labeled PPG 2023 were detailed schedules for every Pinnacle Development Group project: the Brennan Development, the Riverside Commons expansion, the Cedar Hills Sustainable Community, all carefully mapped out with timelines, budgets, and consultant requirements. None of them mentioned archaeological assessment. None of them involved land with historical significance. None of them required the services of Blackwood & Associates Archaeological Consulting. The $500 monthly payments to Zara weren't for professional services. They were allowances. Marcus was giving his lover a regular monthly stipend, probably to supplement her academic salary and fund their secret lifestyle.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I closed the laptop and sat in our living room, surrounded by wedding photos and shared possessions that now felt contaminated by deception. The throw pillows I'd carefully selected to complement our color scheme, the bookshelf where Marcus's business magazine sat next to my art history texts, the coffee table we'd bought together at a Portland flea market during our second year of marriage, when money was tight, but we'd felt rich in possibility. Everything in our home told the story of a couple building a life together. But that story was fiction, and I'd been the only one who didn't know I was living in a novel with an unreliable narrator. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was realizing how systematically I'd been excluded from my own life. While I'd been nurturing our marriage, managing our household, and building relationships with the Blackwoods, Marcus had been constructing an entirely separate existence. He'd been living a double life with such skill that I'd never suspected anything beyond ordinary work stress. The reservation at Le Jardin Noir wasn't an anomaly. It was simply the latest chapter in a romance novel I'd accidentally discovered, where I played the role of the oblivious wife who gets written out of the story so the real lovers can have their happy ending. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He'd forgotten that I wasn't just a supporting character in someone else's love story. I was the woman who'd organized charity galas for 500 people, managed complex grant applications under impossible deadlines, and built community programs from nothing but good intentions and stubborn determination. If Marcus wanted to play games with reservations and secret dinners, he was about to discover that I was exceptionally good at event planning. Thursday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. The lie came easily, my voice carrying just the right note of congestion when I spoke to Dr. Miranda Foster, my supervisor at the foundation. She expressed genuine concern and told me to take Friday off too if needed. The irony wasn't lost on me that everyone in my life seemed capable of compassion except my husband. With Marcus at his office and 8 hours of privacy ahead of me, I began the systematic investigation that would either confirm my worst fears or restore my faith in my marriage. Deep down, I already knew which outcome was more likely. I started with our home office, the converted second bedroom where Marcus kept his business files and where we managed our shared household accounts. The filing cabinet that had always been off-limits to me suddenly seemed less like respect for his privacy and more like evidence of secrets worth protecting. The lock was a simple mechanism that yielded to a bobby pin and 15 minutes of determined effort. Inside, I found folders organized with the kind of meticulous attention to detail that Marcus applied to his development projects. Client contracts, tax documents, insurance policies, all sorted by date and category. And tucked behind the legitimate business files, a folder labeled Personal ZB. Zara Blackwood. My hands trembled as I opened it. The contents painted a picture of romantic obsession that made my stomach turn. Printed emails spanning 9 months, starting with professional correspondence about a fictional archaeological assessment for a property Marcus had never actually purchased. The early messages were formally worded, discussing site surveys and historical impact studies. But by the third exchange, the tone had shifted to something more intimate. "Thank you for the thorough site assessment," Marcus had written in July. "Your expertise exceeded my expectations. Perhaps we could discuss the findings over dinner." Zara's response was carefully crafted to seem professional while leaving room for interpretation. "I'd be happy to provide additional consultation. The Meridian Grand has an excellent restaurant that's conducive to detailed discussions." I found hotel receipts paper-clipped to corresponding emails, creating a timeline of their relationship's progression. The Meridian Grand in August, followed by weekend trips to wine country, coastal resorts, and mountain lodges. Each getaway corresponded to dates when Marcus had told me he was attending business conferences or visiting potential development sites. But the most devastating discovery was a handwritten letter from Zara, dated just 2 weeks ago, tucked between hotel receipts like a pressed flower in a book of lies. "My dearest Marcus," it began, in handwriting I recognized from thank you notes she'd sent after dinner parties at our home. "Last night reminded me why I've never felt this way about anyone before. You understand my work, my ambitions, my need for intellectual stimulation in ways that make me feel completely seen. When you talk about our future together, I can picture it so clearly. The life we'll build once we're free from the complications that currently constrain us. The letter went on to describe their shared dreams of traveling together, of Marcus supporting her archaeological research, of starting fresh in a new city where no one would know their history. She wrote about feeling guilty for deceiving her parents, who adored me, but convinced herself that true love justified temporary dishonesty. Your wife seems like a lovely person, Zara had written, words that felt like knives against my ribs. But she's built her life around being needed rather than being wanted. You've outgrown that dynamic, just as I've outgrown academic men who see my success as competition rather than compliment. We're meant for something bigger than the small lives we've been living. The casual dismissal of my marriage as a small life was breathtaking in its cruelty. This woman had sat at my dinner table, accepted my hospitality, and bonded with me over shared experiences of loss and resilience, all while viewing me as an obstacle to her romantic ambitions and my marriage as something Marcus had outgrown, like childhood clothes that no longer fit. I photographed every document with my phone, creating a digital archive of evidence that would be impossible for Marcus to deny or explain away. The emails, the receipts, the letter that revealed not just the physical affair, but their complete emotional betrayal, their plans for a future that required my elimination from the equation. The most chilling discovery came last: a printed Google search for Oregon divorce law, asset division in Marcus's browsing history, dated 3 weeks ago. He hadn't just been having an affair, he'd been researching how to leave me while protecting as much of our shared wealth as possible. The man I'd built a life with had been planning my financial destruction with the same methodical attention he brought to his development projects. While I'd been worrying about our relationship's minor tensions, he'd been consulting divorce attorneys and calculating how to minimize his obligations to the woman who'd supported his career for 8 years. I closed the folder and returned it to its hiding place, my hands steady despite the emotional earthquake happening in my chest. The investigation had answered every question I'd been afraid to ask. Marcus's affair with Zara wasn't a moment of weakness or a midlife crisis that therapy might resolve. It was a calculated exit strategy designed to replace me with someone he considered more suitable for the life he wanted to live. The reservation at Le Jardin Noir wasn't just a romantic dinner. Based on the timeline of his divorce research, it was likely meant to be a celebration of whatever legal maneuver would free him from our marriage. But Marcus had made a fundamental miscalculation. He'd assumed I would remain passive and trusting until he was ready to discard me officially. He'd never considered that his methodical wife might apply her own organizational skills to uncovering his deception. As I carefully restored his office to its original state, I felt something cold and focused settle in my chest where shock and hurt had been churning for days. Marcus and Zara thought they were writing a love story where I played the role of the obstacle to be overcome. They were about to discover they'd cast me as the wrong character entirely. That afternoon, I drove to the Pearl District and parked across from Le Jardin Noir, studying the restaurant where my husband planned to celebrate what he assumed would be my ignorance. The elegant French bistro occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse, its black awnings and gold lettering projecting the kind of understated sophistication that attracted Portland's cultural elite. Through the large windows, I could see the dining room's intimate layout: small tables arranged to maximize privacy, soft lighting that would make conversations feel confidential, an atmosphere designed for romantic confessions and life-changing decisions. If Marcus was planning to ask Zara to run away with him, or if they were celebrating the finalization of divorce paperwork, this would be the perfect setting. But as I sat in my car watching well-dressed couples enter and exit the restaurant, I realized that exposing Marcus's affair wasn't enough anymore. The scope of their betrayal demanded a response that matched its complexity. This wasn't just about catching an unfaithful husband. Marcus and Zara had weaponized my relationships, turning my surrogate family into unwitting accomplices in my destruction. They'd used the Blackwoods' home as a meeting place, exploited Helena and Edmund's affection for me as cover for their deception, and turned family dinners into intelligence-gathering operations where I unknowingly provided information about my schedule and emotional state. The monthly payments to Zara weren't just financial support for a mistress. They were hush money, ensuring her cooperation in maintaining the elaborate fiction that allowed Marcus to live a double life. Every time she accepted that $500, she was being paid to lie to her parents, to deceive me at social gatherings, and to help Marcus plan my eventual abandonment. I pulled out my phone and called the one person whose judgment I trusted above all others, Camila Santos, my closest friend since college and the maid of honor at my wedding. Camila lived in Seattle, far enough from Portland's social circles to offer objective perspective, but close enough to understand the local dynamics that made the situation so complex. "I need to see you," I said when she answered. "Can you drive down this weekend?" Camila had known me for 15 years. She heard the carefully controlled desperation in my voice and asked no questions. "I'll leave work early tomorrow and be there by 7. Should I bring wine?" "Bring everything," I said. "This is going to be a long conversation." That evening, I maintained my performance as the unsuspecting wife with Academy Award-worthy precision. Marcus came home at his usual time, kissed my forehead with what seemed like genuine affection, and asked about my day with the kind of attentive interest that had always made me feel cherished. "Better," I said, referring to my fictional illness. "I think I'll be ready to go back to work Monday." "Good, I was worried about you." He loosened his tie and settled onto our couch, patting the cushion beside him in invitation. "Come here, let me take care of you." I curled against his chest, breathing in the cologne that I now knew Zara had helped him choose, and felt his arms circle me with practiced tenderness. This was the Marcus I'd fallen in love with 12 years ago, the man who'd held me through my mother's death and celebrated every small victory in my career. The physical comfort was real, even if the emotional foundation had rotted away. "How's the Brennan project?" I asked, testing his commitment to the lies that structured our conversations. "Challenging. Tobias is pushing hard for the March deadline." Marcus's voice carried convincing stress. "I'll probably need to work late again Friday to catch up." He delivered the lie while stroking my hair, his touch gentle and reassuring. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. How could someone compartmentalize so completely that they could plan romantic dinners with their mistress while genuinely comforting their wife? "You work too hard," I murmured against his chest, playing my role in the domestic theater that apparently meant nothing to him. "It's temporary. Once this project wraps up, things will get easier." The bitter irony of his words wasn't lost on me. Things would indeed get easier for Marcus once he'd finalized his exit strategy. Easier to be with Zara openly. Easier to access our shared assets before divorce proceedings limited his options. Easier to start the new life they'd been planning while I remained obliviously supportive of the career success that would finance my own abandonment. "I love you," Marcus said, and his voice carried what sounded like genuine emotion. "I love you too," I replied, and in that moment, I meant it. That was the most devastating realization of all. I still loved the man who was systematically destroying my life. The version of Marcus who held me on our couch, who worried about my health and promised that his work stress was temporary, was real, even if everything else was fiction. Somewhere inside the calculating stranger who made secret restaurant reservations was the person I'd married, the one who'd stood beside me in a hospital room holding my hand while my mother died. The tragedy wasn't just that Marcus was leaving me, it was that he was destroying the parts of himself that I'd loved most completely. The honesty that had made him trustworthy, the loyalty that had made him dependable, the emotional transparency that had made intimacy possible. In choosing deception over communication, he'd killed the marriage not through abandonment, but through transformation into someone incapable of the love he claimed to feel. Friday evening at Les Jardins Noirs wouldn't just be about confronting an affair. It would be about demanding an accounting for the systematic murder of everything we'd built together. And if Marcus thought he could celebrate that destruction over champagne and French cuisine while his wife sat home alone, he was about to learn that some reservations came with unexpected guests. Camila arrived Friday evening carrying a bottle of my favorite Pinot Grigio and the kind of determined expression she wore when tackling impossible problems. As the head of litigation support at a Seattle law firm, she possessed both the analytical skills and emotional detachment I desperately needed. "Show me everything," she said, settling onto my couch with the wine and a yellow legal pad she'd produced from her oversized purse. For the next 3 hours, I walked her through my discoveries with the methodical precision of a prosecutor building a case. The credit card statements, the email correspondence, Zara's handwritten letter, Marcus's divorce research. Camilla took notes in her precise handwriting, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed details I'd missed. "The timeline is crucial," she said, studying the pattern of hotel charges. "These aren't random encounters. They're scheduled rendezvous that correspond to your predictable absences. When did you start your monthly grief counseling sessions?" I checked my calendar app. August 15th, every third Thursday at 7 p.m. Camilla cross-referenced the dates with Marcus's credit card charges. "The Meridian Grand charges start August 15th and repeat every third Thursday. They've been using your therapy appointments as cover for hotel meetings." The realization hit like a physical blow. My monthly counseling sessions, where I'd been working through the trauma of losing my mother and learning to build trust in my chosen family, had become the reliable schedule that enabled Marcus and Zara's affair. They'd turned my healing process into their romantic opportunity. "There's more," Camilla continued, her voice carrying the controlled anger of someone who specialized in exposing deception. "The payments to Zara aren't random amounts. They're calculated to stay below the $600 threshold that would trigger automatic reporting to the IRS. Marcus has been structuring these payments to avoid creating a paper trail that would complicate his divorce proceedings." She pulled out her laptop and began cross-referencing the payment dates with my own calendar. "Look at this pattern. The $500 transfers always happen the day after you've had significant social events with the Blackwoods. Dinner parties, holiday celebrations, family gatherings where you would have discussed your emotional state and future plans." The systematic nature of their deception was breathtaking. Zara had been collecting intelligence at every family gathering, gathering information about my mood, my work schedule, my relationship concerns. That intelligence had been used to help Marcus calibrate his performance as the caring husband, ensuring he provided just enough attention to avoid suspicion while maximizing his time with her. "He's been paying her to spy on you in your own chosen family," Camilla said flatly. "This isn't just an affair, it's emotional espionage." We spent Saturday morning documenting everything with the thoroughness that Camilla's legal training demanded. High-resolution photographs of every document, time-stamped screenshots of email threads, a comprehensive spreadsheet tracking financial transactions against calendar dates. She helped me create secure cloud storage for all evidence, ensuring it would be preserved even if Marcus discovered my investigation. "Now comes the hard part," Camilla said, over lunch at a downtown cafe far from any location where we might be recognized. "What do you want to accomplish? Because the evidence you've gathered gives you multiple options." I'd been wrestling with that question since discovering the reservation confirmation. Public humiliation felt appealing when I imagined Marcus's shock at being confronted during his romantic dinner. Legal action seemed appropriate given the financial deception and structured payments, but neither approach addressed the deeper violation of trust that extended beyond my marriage into the family relationships I'd rebuilt after my mother's death. "The dinner at Le Jardin Noir is tomorrow night," I said. "Whatever I do, it has to happen then, while they're celebrating what they think is my ignorance." Camilla studied me with the sharp attention she brought to difficult cases. "You're not just angry about the affair. You're devastated about Helena and Edmund being unknowingly complicit in your betrayal." She was right. The Blackwoods had welcomed Marcus into their family, included him in intimate gatherings, trusted him with their daughter's well-being. They had no idea that their hospitality was being used as camouflage for an affair that involved regular financial payments and systematic deception. "They deserve to know what their daughter and my husband have been doing in their name," I said, "and they deserve the chance to respond before Marcus and Zara disappear into whatever new life they're planning." Camilla nodded slowly. "You want witnesses. people whose judgment Marcus and Zara respect, who can hold them accountable in ways that legal consequences never could. That afternoon, I called Helena Blackwood and asked if she and Edmund would like to join me for dinner Sunday evening at Le Jardin Noir. I'd discovered they were having a celebration dinner for a colleague's retirement, I explained, and thought it might be nice to create our own special occasion. What a lovely idea, Helena said warmly. Edmund has been saying we never take advantage of Portland's fine dining scene. What time should we meet you? 8 o'clock, I said. I'll make the reservation. After hanging up, I called Le Jardin Noir and explained that I needed to add 2 guests to an existing reservation under my husband's name for Friday evening. The hostess was accommodating, noting that the restaurant could easily arrange for a larger table to accommodate the additional guests. Would you prefer to be seated together or at separate tables? She asked. Separate tables would be perfect, I said, but close enough for conversation if the opportunity arises. By Sunday afternoon, every element was in place. The evidence was documented and secured, the witnesses were confirmed and expectant, the restaurant was prepared for a party larger than Marcus had planned. All that remained was to watch my husband and his lover walk into the most uncomfortable dinner of their lives, unaware that their victims had decided to crash the celebration. Sunday morning brought an unexpected phone call that nearly derailed my carefully orchestrated plan. Helena Blackwood's voice carried unusual tension when I answered, a nervousness that immediately put me on alert. "Isabel, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling so early," she began. "Edmund and I are both looking forward to dinner tonight, but I wanted to ask you something rather delicate." My heart stopped. Had they somehow discovered Zara's affair? Had Marcus confided in Edmund about his divorce plans? I gripped the phone tighter, preparing for my entire strategy to collapse before it could be executed. "Of course, Helena. What's on your mind?" "Well, it's about Zara. She mentioned that she might be joining some friends for dinner at Le Jardin Noir tonight as well. I know it's a large restaurant, but Portland can feel so small sometimes. I hope it won't be awkward if we run into her." The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. Helena was worried about accidentally encountering her daughter during what she thought was a coincidental dinner, while I was orchestrating exactly that encounter to expose Zara's systematic betrayal of everyone who loved her. "I'm sure it will be fine," I managed, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "It might even be nice to see her. She's been so busy lately with her consulting work, something about helping local developers navigate archaeological requirements for their projects. Edmund is proud of her for expanding beyond pure academia, but we hardly see her anymore." Each word felt like a knife twist. Zara hadn't just been lying to me. She'd been deceiving her parents about the nature of her consulting work while they celebrated her professional growth and worried about her social isolation. "Has she mentioned any of the developers she's working with?" I asked carefully. "Not by name. She's always been discreet about client confidentiality, though she did mention that one of her clients has become something of a mentor figure, helping her think about career transitions and long-term planning. It's wonderful when professional relationships develop into meaningful connections." The casual way Helena described Marcus as a mentor figure in her daughter's life made me physically nauseous. While Zara's parents worried about her limited social circle and celebrated her professional development, she'd been conducting an affair that involved regular financial payments and systematic deception of everyone who cared about her. "She seems to be developing real confidence in her consulting abilities," Helena continued, oblivious to the double meaning of every word. "Just last week, she mentioned how much she'd learned about project management and client relations from this particular developer. She said he's been incredibly generous with his time and expertise, really investing in her professional development." I closed my eyes, processing how even Helena's maternal pride was being manipulated. Marcus's investment in Zara's professional development was the monthly payments that had been funding their affair, while she gathered intelligence about my emotional state during family dinners. "She's talked about maybe transitioning from pure academic work to more practical applications of her archaeological training." Edmund's voice came through the background, having apparently joined the conversation. "This consulting relationship seems to be opening doors she never knew existed." The conversation continued for another 15 minutes, with Helena and Edmund sharing their hopes for Zara's career development and their gratitude for the mysterious mentor who was helping their daughter expand her professional horizons. Every word of parental pride felt like documentation of how thoroughly Zara had corrupted their love and concern into unwitting support for systematic deception. After hanging up with Helena, I called Camilla to report this development. She listened with the focused attention she brought to complex legal strategies, asking questions that helped me process the implications. "This actually strengthens your position," she said. "The Blackwoods aren't just innocent bystanders, they're proud parents who've been actively misled about their daughter's conduct. When they discover the truth tonight, their response will be more powerful because it comes from genuine betrayal rather than abstract moral judgment." Camilla was right. Helena and Edmund weren't simply witnesses I was recruiting to embarrass Marcus and Zara. They were victims of the same systematic deception, people whose love and trust had been weaponized to enable crimes committed in their name. They've been celebrating Marcus's mentorship of their daughter while he's been paying her monthly fees for services that have nothing to do with archaeology, I said, feeling the full weight of the betrayal settling in my chest. Every family dinner where they've expressed pride in Zara's professional development has been an unknowing celebration of her corruption. "Are you ready for this?" Camilla asked. "Because once you walk into that restaurant tonight, there's no controlling what happens next. You're about to destroy multiple relationships simultaneously, and the Blackwoods are going to learn that their daughter isn't who they thought she was." I considered her question while staring out my kitchen window at the garden Marcus and I had planted together 3 springs ago. The roses we'd selected were blooming now, their colors vibrant against the early summer evening. Everything in our home and our life together was beautiful and carefully tended, built through years of shared decisions and mutual care. But beauty built on lies wasn't sustainable. Gardens required honest soil to flourish, and the foundation of our marriage had been contaminated by deception so systematic that it poisoned every relationship it touched. The Blackwoods deserved to know that their pride in their daughter's professional growth was based on lies, that their mentorship celebration was actually subsidizing systematic betrayal, and that their family home had been used as headquarters for destroying the life of someone they loved. "I'm ready," I said. "They made their choices when they decided our love wasn't worth preserving. Tonight, they'll face the consequences of those choices in front of people whose opinions actually matter to them." The drive to La Jardin Noir took me through the heart of Portland's Pearl District, past the gallery where Marcus and I had attended our first art opening together, beyond the coffee shop where we'd spent Sunday mornings reading newspapers and planning our future. Each familiar landmark felt like a memorial to the relationship I'd thought we were building while he was systematically dismantling it. I arrived 25 minutes early and parked across the street, using the time to observe the restaurant's evening rhythm and prepare myself psychologically for what was about to unfold. Through the large windows, I could see couples settling into intimate conversations over wine, their body language suggesting the kind of romantic connection I'd believed Marcus and I still shared. The valet area buzzed with activity as Portland's cultural elite arrived for their weekend celebrations. Expensive cars, elegant clothing, the kind of sophisticated crowd that La Jardin Noir the perfect setting for Marcus and Zara's romantic milestone. They'd chosen this restaurant because it represented the life they wanted to live together, the kind of upscale sophistication that my grief counseling sessions and foundation work couldn't provide. At exactly 7:40, Helena and Edmund Blackwood emerged from their silver Volvo, walking arm in arm with the easy affection of a couple who'd weathered 35 years of marriage without losing their fundamental trust in each other. Helena wore an elegant black dress I'd complimented during our last dinner together, and Edmund had chosen the navy suit that made him look distinguished behind his wire-rimmed glasses. They were dressed for celebration, expecting an evening of good food and conversation with someone they considered family. The knowledge that I was about to shatter their faith in their daughter made my stomach clench with guilt that competed with my determination to expose the truth. I watched them enter the restaurant and speak with the hostess, who consulted her reservation system and gestured toward the dining room. Through the window, I could see them being seated at a corner table with a clear view of the entrance, perfect positioning for what was about to unfold. Helena was animated, gesturing as she spoke to Edmund, probably sharing her excitement about our spontaneous dinner invitation. At 7:50, a black Mercedes pulled up to the valet stand, and I recognized the distinctive license plate before I could see the occupants. Dr. Miranda Foster, my supervisor from the foundation, emerged from the passenger seat, followed by her husband Robert. They were regulars at Le Jardin Noir, celebrating their 20th anniversary with the kind of romantic tradition I'd hoped Marcus and I would develop over time. Miranda's presence added another layer of complexity to the evening. She'd been a mentor during my career development, someone who'd supported my promotion ambitions and praised my organizational skills. Tonight, she'd witness me orchestrate the destruction of my marriage with those same organizational capabilities she'd encouraged me to develop professionally. At 7:55, Marcus's BMW pulled into the restaurant's valet area. He emerged wearing the charcoal suit I'd helped him select for our anniversary dinner 2 years ago, the same outfit he'd worn when he'd promised me that our best years were still ahead of us. The irony felt deliberately cruel, as if he'd chosen to dress for his betrayal in clothes that symbolized his commitment. But it was seeing Zara emerge from the passenger seat that made the full scope of their deception finally crystallize. She wore a stunning emerald dress that I immediately recognized as the one from the Victoria's Secret charges on Marcus's credit card statement. The same dress I'd assumed was a purchase for me, since Marcus had mentioned buying me a surprise gift around that date. He'd been buying gifts for his mistress while letting me believe they were expressions of his love for me. Every romantic gesture had been contaminated by deception so systematic that I'd been celebrating my own betrayal without knowing it. I watched Marcus place his hand on the small of Zara's back as they approached the restaurant entrance, the same possessive gesture he'd used with me during our courtship. They moved together with the easy intimacy of an established couple, their body language suggesting comfort and familiarity that extended far beyond the 9 months I'd documented in their email correspondence. This affair hadn't started 9 months ago. The professional correspondence I found was simply when they'd begun documenting their relationship digitally. The physical connection, the emotional intimacy, the systematic deception of everyone who loved them had been developing much longer. As they disappeared into the restaurant, I realized that everything I'd believed about the timeline of my marriage was wrong. The distance I'd attributed to work stress, the gradual decline in Marcus's romantic attention, the way he'd stopped initiating conversations about our future together hadn't been signs of temporary relationship challenges. They'd been symptoms of his emotional withdrawal as he'd invested himself elsewhere. While I'd been trying to rekindle our connection through thoughtful gestures and patient support, he'd been falling in love with someone else and calculating how to exit our marriage with minimal personal cost. The monthly payments to Zara weren't just financial support or hush money. They were relationship maintenance, the kind of regular investment that couples make in building a life together. Marcus had been subsidizing his future with her, while I'd been unknowingly funding my own abandonment through our joint accounts. At exactly 8 p.m., I walked through the doors of Le Jardin Noir, carrying 8 years of marriage documentation and a heart that had transformed from loving trust into methodical justice. The hostess greeted me with professional warmth, checking her reservation system when I mentioned joining the Blackwood party. Within moments, I was being led through the elegant dining room toward the corner table where Helena and Edmund waited, completely unaware that their quiet family dinner was about to become the most devastating evening of their lives. "Isabel!" Helena's face lit up with genuine warmth as I approached their table. She rose to embrace me with the maternal affection that had helped heal the wounds left by my mother's death. "You look beautiful, dear. That dress is stunning on you." Edmund stood as well, offering his characteristic courtly greeting with a slight bow that has always made me feel cherished and respected. Our mystery dinner companion arrives. Helena has been speculating about what celebration could have prompted such a lovely invitation. I settled into the chair across from them, my heart hammering against my ribs, as I prepared to shatter their evening with revelations that would destroy their faith in their daughter. They looked so trusting, so genuinely pleased to be sharing what they believed was a spontaneous celebration with someone they'd come to love as family. The wine Edmund had ordered sat breathing on the table, a bottle of the French Bordeaux that had become our traditional choice during family celebrations. Helena had already ordered appetizers, the kind of thoughtful hospitality that had made their home my sanctuary after my mother's death. Everything about their demeanor suggested eager anticipation of an evening filled with good food and meaningful conversation. Actually, I began carefully, there's something I need to share with both of you before we order, something that affects all of us, and I thought you deserved to hear it from someone who cares about you deeply. Helena's expression shifted from celebration to concern, her maternal instincts immediately recognizing the gravity in my tone. "What's wrong, dear? You look distressed." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us, my hands steady despite the emotional earthquake happening in my chest. 3 weeks ago, I accidentally discovered that Marcus has been having an affair with Zara. The words fell into the elegant restaurant atmosphere like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples of shock that spread across Helena and Edmund's faces in real time. Edmund's wine glass froze halfway to his lips, while Helena's hand flew to her throat in an unconscious gesture of protection. "That's impossible," Helena whispered. "Zara would never. She knows how much we adore you and Marcus. She wouldn't destroy relationships that mean so much to our family." I showed them the credit card statements on my phone, explaining the systematic nature of the monthly payments and how they corresponded to family gatherings where Zara would have gathered intelligence about my emotional state and schedule. With each piece of evidence, I watched Helena and Edmund's faces transform from disbelief to recognition to devastation. "The 500 payments," Edmund said quietly, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone processing betrayal. "She told us a client was paying her monthly consulting fees for ongoing archaeological assessments. She said it was supplementing her academic salary." "She's been using your family gatherings to collect information about my marriage," I continued, showing them screenshots of email correspondence. "Every dinner at your house, every celebration where we shared personal details about our lives, was intelligence gathering that helped Marcus maintain his deception." Helena began crying silently, tears streaming down her cheeks as she processed how her daughter had weaponized their family hospitality. "All those times she asked about your counseling sessions, your work schedule, your relationship concerns. I thought she was being caring, showing interest in your well-being." "She was being caring," I said gently, "but she was also reporting everything back to Marcus so he could calibrate his performance as the caring husband while maximizing his time with her." Edmund removed his glasses and cleaned them with shaking hands, a nervous gesture I'd observed during our most difficult family conversations. "The questions about your anniversary plans, your vacation schedules, your work obligations, she was mapping your availability for their convenience." "Every family dinner became a briefing session," Helena said, her voice breaking as she understood the scope of manipulation. "We thought we were providing emotional support for your marriage, but we were actually helping them plan its destruction." I reached across the table and took Helena's hand, feeling how her fingers trembled with shock and grief. "That's exactly why I needed you both here, because this isn't just about exposing an affair. It's about confronting the systematic way they've used your love and trust as weapons against me. They've turned your family home into a staging area for deception that's damaged everyone who cares about them." Edmund straightened in his chair, his academic composure reasserting itself as he processed the situation with analytical precision. "Where are they now? Marcus told you he was working late?" "They're here," I said, gesturing toward the intimate dining room where couples shared romantic evenings over French cuisine. Helena's grief transformed into something harder and more focused. "They're having their celebration dinner while we sit here learning how they've betrayed everyone who loves them." "That's exactly why I needed you both here," I said, "because this isn't just about exposing an affair. It's about confronting the systematic way they've used your love and trust as weapons against me. They've turned your family home into a staging area for deception that's damaged everyone who cares about them." Edmund stood slightly, scanning the dining room until his eyes found Marcus and Zara at their corner table. "There," he said quietly, settling back into his chair. "They look quite comfortable, don't they? Celebrating their successful deception while their victims sit 20 feet away." Helena wiped her eyes with her napkin, her maternal authority reasserting herself as she processed the full scope of betrayal. They need to face what they've done, not in private, where they can minimize consequences or control the narrative, but here, in front of people whose judgment matters. "What do you propose we do about it?" Edmund asked, his scholarly mind engaging with the strategic challenge before us. I looked across the restaurant toward the table where Marcus and Zara were sharing champagne and intimate conversation, completely unaware that their victims had united to demand accountability for crimes committed in the name of love. "I propose we remind them that actions have consequences," I said, "and that some celebrations are more public than others." Edmund leaned forward, his academic mind engaging with the strategic challenge before us. "If we're going to confront them publicly, we need to be methodical about it. Emotional outbursts will only give them opportunities to deflect or escape accountability." Helena dabbed her eyes with her napkin, her maternal grief transforming into something sharper and more focused. "They've been using our family dinners as cover for planning your destruction, Isabel. Every time we welcomed Marcus into our home, we were unknowingly facilitating your betrayal." I watched Helena and Edmund process the full scope of how they'd been manipulated, their academic backgrounds providing the analytical framework to understand the systematic nature of the deception. They weren't just hurt parents discovering their daughter's affair. They were intelligent people recognizing how their love and trust had been weaponized against someone they considered family. "The timing has to be perfect," I said, pulling out the folder of printed evidence Camilla had helped me organize. "They're celebrating what they believe is their successful deception. If we approach their table during the main course, they'll have invested enough in the evening to feel trapped, but not so much that they can claim we're causing unnecessary drama." Edmund studied the restaurant's layout with strategic precision. Their table is positioned for privacy, but it's visible from most of the dining room. Any conversation we have will be observed by other patrons, which will prevent them from creating a scene or storming out dramatically. "What exactly do we want to accomplish?" Helena asked, her voice steady despite the emotional devastation I could see in her eyes. "Because confronting them publicly will destroy relationships that can never be repaired." The question hung between us like a challenge. This wasn't just about exposing Marcus and Zara's affair. It was about demanding accountability for the systematic way they'd manipulated everyone who loved them, turning family gatherings into intelligence operations and romantic support into financial opportunities. "I want them to face the people they've betrayed while they're celebrating that betrayal," I said. "I want Zara to explain to her parents why she's been accepting monthly payments from my husband while lying about the nature of their relationship. And I want Marcus to justify why he's been using your family hospitality as cover for planning our divorce." Helena's expression hardened with resolve. She needs to see what her choices have cost, not just you, but everyone who's loved and supported her. We spent the next 20 minutes developing our approach with the methodical precision that all three of us brought to our professional lives. Helena would lead the conversation, using her maternal authority to create a situation Zara couldn't easily escape. Edmund would present the documentary evidence, his academic credibility making the financial deception undeniable. I would serve as the primary victim, whose presence would force both Marcus and Zara to confront the human cost of their actions. "The goal isn't revenge," Edmund clarified, his scholarly instincts demanding ethical clarity. "It's accountability. They've made choices that have damaged multiple people, and they need to face the consequences of those choices in the presence of everyone they've betrayed." I watched Marcus and Zara across the dining room, sharing champagne and intimate conversation while completely unaware that their victims were planning their confrontation. They looked genuinely happy, lost in each other's company, with the kind of romantic absorption I remembered from the early days of my relationship with Marcus. The tragedy wasn't just that they destroyed my marriage, it was that their love for each other had transformed them into people capable of systematic cruelty toward everyone else who cared about them. Whatever genuine connection they shared had been corrupted by the deception required to maintain it. Are we all committed to this? I asked, looking between Helena and Edmund. Because once we approach their table, there's no controlling how they'll respond or what the consequences will be. Helena reached across the table and squeezed my hand with the same maternal comfort she'd provided during my darkest grief. They've been celebrating your pain while we've been unknowingly enabling it. It's time they face everyone they've betrayed. Edmund nodded gravely. Some lessons can only be taught through consequences. At 8:45 p.m., we rose from our table and walked across Le Jardin Noir's elegant dining room toward the corner where Marcus and Zara were sharing what they believed was a private celebration. They were about to discover that some celebrations come with unexpected guests. As we approached Marcus and Zara's table, I felt the strange calm that comes with absolute commitment to an irreversible course of action. The elegant dining room seemed to slow around us, conversations muting to background whispers as my entire focus narrowed to the couple sharing champagne in the corner booth. Marcus saw us first. His face cycled through confusion, recognition, and dawning horror in the space of 3 seconds. The champagne flute in his hand trembled slightly as he processed the impossible sight of his wife approaching with his lover's parents, all of us wearing expressions that suggested this wasn't a coincidental encounter. Zara followed his gaze and went completely still, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth with a bite of the restaurant's signature coq au vin. The confident woman who'd been laughing at Marcus's jokes moments earlier transformed into someone who looked cornered and desperate for escape routes that didn't exist. Marcus, Zara, Helena said with the kind of controlled maternal authority that had managed classrooms full of graduate students for 3 decades. What a lovely surprise to find you here. Mind if we join you? Without waiting for a response, Helena slid into the booth beside Zara, effectively trapping her against the wall. Edmund took the chair across from Marcus, his academic composure lending gravity to the situation. I remained standing at the head of their table, my position forcing other diners to notice our gathering while preventing easy escape. "Mom, Dad," Zara managed, her voice barely above a whisper, "what are you doing here?" "Having dinner with Isabel," Helena replied smoothly. "She had some fascinating information to share about your consulting work with Marcus's company. We thought it might be nice to discuss it with you directly." Marcus attempted to recover his composure, reaching for the confidence that had carried him through 8 years of marriage and 9 months of systematic deception. "This is awkward timing. Zara and I were just discussing some project details." "The Peterson account?" I interrupted, using the name from his fabricated client dinner excuse. "Or perhaps the archaeological assessment for the property you never actually purchased?" The color drained from Marcus's face as he realized I knew the specific details of their deception. Zara's hand moved instinctively toward her purse, but Helena's presence blocked any possibility of a graceful retreat. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," Zara said, her academic training providing her with a professional tone that might have seemed convincing to casual observers. "Marcus and I have been working together on legitimate consulting projects." Edmund placed his phone on the table, the screen displaying the bank statements that documented their monthly financial transactions. "Perhaps you could explain these consulting fees then. $500, transferred on the same date each month, always the day after our family gatherings." Zara's eyes widened as she recognized the financial evidence that made her lies impossible to maintain. The systematic nature of the payments, their correlation with family dinners, the timing that revealed how she'd been monetizing intelligence gathering at her parents' dinner table. "The amounts are carefully calculated to avoid IRS reporting requirements," I added, watching Marcus realize that his financial planning had been thoroughly exposed. "Just like the hotel charges that correspond to my therapy appointments and the restaurant expenses that match dates when you told me you were working late." Other diners had begun to notice our tense conversation, Their romantic evenings providing an audience for the confrontation Marcus and Zara had never anticipated. The intimate restaurant setting that had seemed perfect for celebrating their successful deception now trapped them in full view of Portland's cultural elite. You've been using our family home as headquarters for planning Isabel's emotional and financial destruction, Helena continued, her voice carrying the kind of disappointed authority that made grown students weep in her office. Every dinner where we welcomed Marcus as family, every gathering where we shared our affection for Isabel was intelligence collection for your systematic betrayal. Marcus made one final attempt to control the narrative. Helena, this is more complicated than it appears. My marriage to Isabel had problems you created, I said quietly, while accepting love and support from people who trusted you completely. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft jazz playing through the restaurant sound system and the distant conversations of diners who remained blissfully unaware that they were witnessing the destruction of multiple relationships simultaneously. Marcus and Zara sat trapped in their corner booth, surrounded by the people they'd betrayed, unable to escape the accountability they'd never expected to face. Edmund opened his leather portfolio with the methodical precision he brought to faculty meetings, extracting documents that would shatter any remaining pretense of innocence. Before we discuss your personal relationship, perhaps we should address the broader pattern of deception you've both been maintaining. He placed a timeline on the table, meticulously constructed from credit card statements, email correspondence, and financial records. This documents systematic fraud spanning 18 months, involving not just your affair, but deliberate manipulation of academic and professional relationships for financial gain. Zara's professional composure finally cracked. Dad, you don't understand the context. I understand that you've been accepting monthly payments from a married man while lying to your family about the nature of your relationship, Edmund replied, his scholarly tone making the accusation more devastating than emotional outrage would have been. I understand that you've used our family dinners as intelligence-gathering operations, collecting information about Isabel's emotional state and schedule to facilitate her husband's deception. Helena pulled out her own documentation, letters and emails that revealed the scope of their planning. What I don't understand is how you justified turning our home into headquarters for destroying the life of someone we love like a daughter. Marcus attempted one final deflection, reaching for the charm that had carried him through years of successful deception. Helena, I know this looks terrible, but you have to understand that Isabel and I had grown apart. Our marriage had fundamental problems you created, I said quietly, while systematically looting our joint accounts. I interrupted, placing bank statements on the table that showed his financial preparations for abandonment. While I was attending grief counseling, you were researching divorce attorneys and calculating how to minimize your financial obligations to me. The evidence spread across their romantic dinner table created a comprehensive picture of betrayal that extended far beyond a simple affair. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, offshore account documentation, legal consultation fees, all organized with the precision of a forensic audit. You turned my mother's death into an opportunity, I continued, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of the revelation. While Helena and Edmund were helping me rebuild my capacity for trust and family connection, you were using their support as camouflage for destroying everything I valued. Other diners had abandoned any pretense of privacy, their conversations stopping as they witnessed what appeared to be a very public reckoning between people who'd clearly known each other intimately. The elegant restaurant setting that had seemed perfect for Marcus and Zara's celebration had become a courtroom where their victims presented evidence that made denial impossible. The consulting payments weren't professional fees, Edmund said, his academic authority lending weight to each word. They were structured financial support designed to avoid tax implications and reporting requirements. You've been subsidizing your daughter's lifestyle while she helped destroy someone else's marriage. Helena's maternal authority cut through any remaining pretense. You've both been living a lie that required the systematic betrayal of everyone who loved you. Every family gathering, every holiday celebration, every moment of support and affection we've shared has been contaminated by your deception. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft clink of silverware from nearby tables and the distant murmur of conversations that seemed impossibly normal given the devastation happening in our corner of the restaurant. Marcus and Zara faced their victims across a table littered with evidence that made their crimes undeniable, surrounded by witnesses who would ensure their accountability extended far beyond this single evening. Zara finally broke, her academic composure disintegrating under the weight of evidence and her parents' disappointed stare. "You don't understand what it's like," she said, her voice rising with desperation. "Being trapped in academia, watching everyone else build real wealth and meaningful relationships while I publish papers no one reads." "So you decided to destroy someone else's marriage to solve your career dissatisfaction?" Helena's maternal authority had transformed into something sharper and more cutting. "You turned our family's love for Isabel into a weapon against her." Marcus leaned forward, attempting to regain control of a situation that had spiraled beyond his ability to manage. "This wasn't supposed to happen like this. We were planning to handle the transition responsibly, to minimize hurt to everyone involved." I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter in the elegant restaurant atmosphere. "Responsibly? You've been planning my financial ruin while I supported your career and welcomed your lover into our family gatherings? What part of that seems responsible?" Edmund consulted his timeline documentation, his academic precision making each revelation more devastating. "According to the financial records, you began researching divorce attorneys 6 months ago, well before any conversation with Isabel about marital problems. You've been planning her abandonment while accepting her emotional support." "The offshore accounts were established 8 months ago," I added, watching Marcus realize that his careful financial planning had been thoroughly exposed. "You've been systematically moving our assets beyond my reach, while I believed we were building our future together." Helena turned to face her daughter with the kind of disappointed authority that Zara had probably feared since childhood. "How long have you been lying to us about the nature of this relationship? How long have we been unknowingly facilitating your betrayal of someone we consider family?" Zara's defiance cracked completely. "It wasn't supposed to go on this long. Marcus said he would leave Isabel after the first few months, but there were always complications, legal considerations, timing issues." "Timing issues?" I interrupted, feeling something cold and focused settle in my chest. "Like waiting for my mother's death to stop being a financial drain on our joint accounts? Like ensuring my grief counseling had established a predictable schedule you could use for hotel meetings?" The systematic cruelty of their planning was breathtaking. They hadn't just been having an affair, they'd been calculating how my personal tragedies could be leveraged for their romantic convenience. Marcus attempted one final deflection. "Isabel, our marriage had fundamental problems that we never addressed. The intimacy, the intellectual connection, the shared ambitions. All of which you found with my husband," Helena said to Zara, her voice carrying a finality that made other diners pause in their conversations. "While sitting at our dinner table, accepting our hospitality, and pretending to care about the woman whose life you were systematically destroying." The evidence spread across their romantic dinner table told a story of betrayal that extended over 18 months, involving systematic deception of multiple families and the calculated destruction of trust relationships that had taken years to build. Vincent Castellano, the restaurant manager, approached our table with diplomatic concern. "Is everything all right here? Other guests have expressed some concern about—" Edmund replied with academic authority. "We're simply having a family discussion about accountability and consequences." But as I looked at Marcus and Zara, trapped in their corner booth with evidence of their crimes spread before them like a prosecutor's closing argument, I realized this confrontation was only the beginning. Their real consequences were about to unfold in ways they'd never imagined possible. The restaurant manager's diplomatic intervention had created a momentary pause in our confrontation, but it also provided the perfect opportunity to escalate beyond private accusations to public accountability. Vincent Castellano stood beside our table with professional concern, clearly wanting to resolve whatever disturbance was affecting his other patrons without causing additional drama. Actually, Vincent, I said, recognizing him from the foundation's annual fundraiser where his restaurant had donated catering services, perhaps you could help us with something. We're having a discussion about business ethics and professional relationships that might benefit from your perspective. Vincent's expression shifted from diplomatic concern to recognition as he placed my face from previous charity events. Mrs. Moreau, of course. How can I assist you? Helena seized the opportunity with the strategic instincts of someone who'd managed academic politics for decades. We're discussing a situation where someone has been using professional consulting relationships to cover systematic deception of multiple parties. As a business owner, you might have insights about appropriate ethical boundaries. I watched Marcus realize that our confrontation was about to expand beyond the confines of family drama into a public discussion of professional conduct. His face went ashen as he understood that Vincent's presence meant their private celebration was becoming a community accountability session. The situation involves archaeological consulting services that appear to have been fabricated to cover personal relationships. Edmund continued, his academic authority lending credibility to what might otherwise seem like family gossip. Monthly payments, structured to avoid reporting requirements, falsified business expenses, systematic deception of spouses and family members. Zara attempted to interrupt. This is a private matter that doesn't concern. It concerns everyone when professional credentials are used to facilitate fraud, Helena cut her off with maternal authority that brooked no argument. When academic relationships are weaponized to destroy trust and manipulate financial systems. Vincent looked between Marcus and Zara with growing comprehension, recognizing the outline of systematic deception that went far beyond simple marital infidelity. As a business owner in Portland's tight-knit professional community, he understood the implications of what was being described. I see, Vincent said carefully. That would indeed raise serious questions about professional ethics and community standards. Other diners had abandoned any pretense of privacy, their romantic evenings providing an audience for what was becoming a very public reckoning. The elegant restaurant setting that Marcus and Zara had chosen for their celebration was transforming into a courtroom where their professional reputations would be judged alongside their personal conduct. The documentation is quite comprehensive, I said, gesturing to the evidence spread across their dinner table. Financial records, email correspondence, timeline analysis showing systematic planning over 18 months, the kind of evidence that makes denial impossible and accountability unavoidable. Marcus made one desperate attempt to control the narrative. This is a private family matter that's been blown out of proportion. We never intended. You intended to destroy my marriage while using our shared relationships as camouflage. You intended to move our assets beyond my reach while I supported your career development. You intended to abandon me after using my grief as a convenient scheduling tool for your hotel meetings. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the soft jazz playing through the restaurant sound system and the barely audible conversations of diners who were witnessing something unprecedented in Portland's usually discreet social circles. Vincent cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps there's somewhere more private where you could continue this discussion. Privacy is what enabled 18 months of systematic deception, Helena replied. Some conversations need witnesses to ensure accountability. Marcus and Zara sat trapped in their corner booth, surrounded by evidence, witnesses, and the dawning realization that their carefully planned celebration had become the most public exposure of their crimes they could have imagined. Vincent excused himself with diplomatic efficiency, but not before several other diners had clearly overheard enough details to understand the nature of our confrontation. The elegant restaurant that had seemed perfect for Marcus and Zara's romantic celebration was now filled with witnesses to their systematic deception. 18 months, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet dining room. 18 months of you sitting at Helena and Edmund's dinner table, accepting their hospitality, listening to me share my fears about our marriage, and reporting everything back to Marcus so he could calibrate his performance as the caring husband. Zara's professional composure had completely disintegrated. You don't understand the pressure I was under, the academic job market, the financial stress, the isolation. So you decided to solve your problems by destroying someone else's life, Helena interrupted, her maternal authority now carrying the full weight of betrayal and disappointment. You turned our family gatherings into intelligence operations against someone we love. Edmund placed the final pieces of evidence on the table, screenshots of Marcus's Google searches for divorce attorneys, copies of offshore banking applications, documentation of asset transfers that had been prepared months before any discussion of marital problems. This wasn't passion overcoming judgment, Edmund said with scholarly precision. This was calculated financial planning disguised as romance. You've been systematically preparing Isabel's abandonment while accepting her emotional support and financial contribution to your shared life. Marcus made one final attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. The marriage was over anyway. Isabel and I had grown apart, lost our connection. Lost our connection because you were investing it elsewhere, I said, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. While I was trying to rebuild intimacy after my mother's death, you were falling in love with someone else and calculating how to leave me with minimal financial obligation. The evidence spread across their romantic dinner table told a story that made denial impossible. Hotel receipts corresponding to my therapy appointments, restaurant charges for celebrations that had nothing to do with me, monthly payments structured to avoid tax implications, asset transfers designed to protect Marcus's wealth from divorce proceedings. Every time you accepted that $500, Helena said to Zara, her voice carrying devastating disappointment, you were being paid to betray everyone who loved you, your parents, your family's trust, your professional ethics, and someone who considered you a friend. Other diners had given up any pretense of privacy, their romantic evenings providing an audience for what was clearly the destruction of multiple relationships simultaneously. The intimate restaurant setting that had seemed perfect for celebrating successful deception now trapped Marcus and Zara in full view of Portland's cultural community. The most devastating part, I continued, isn't that you fell in love with each other. It's that your love required the systematic destruction of everyone else who cared about you. You turned your relationship into a criminal enterprise that used other people's trust as weapons. Vincent Castellano returned with the check for their table, his diplomatic expression suggesting he understood that their celebration was definitively over. Will there be anything else this evening? Just the consequences, Edmund replied gravely. As Marcus reached for his wallet with shaking hands, I realized that the woman who'd answered that misdirected phone call 3 weeks ago would never have imagined herself capable of orchestrating such complete accountability. But that woman had believed in the fundamental honesty of the people she loved most. This woman had learned that some lessons could only be taught through public consequences, witnessed by everyone whose judgment actually mattered. Marcus paid the check with trembling hands, while Zara sat frozen beside him, her academic confidence completely shattered by the public exposure of their systematic deception. The elegant restaurant that had been the setting for their celebration had become the courtroom where their crimes were judged by everyone whose opinion mattered in Portland's tight-knit professional community. This conversation isn't over, Helena said, as Marcus and Zara prepared to leave. We'll be having a family meeting tomorrow evening to discuss the full scope of consequences for your choices. Zara looked at her parents with desperate pleading. Mom, Dad, please don't let this destroy our family. You destroyed our family when you turned our home into headquarters for betraying someone we love, Edmund replied with the kind of academic finality that ended debates. Tomorrow, we'll discuss what salvage operations are possible, if any. As Marcus and Zara finally escaped from their corner booths, they had to walk past tables full of diners who'd witnessed their complete humiliation. The Portland cultural elite who frequented Le Jardin Noir would carry this story into every professional and social circle they inhabited. By Monday morning, everyone in their respective professional communities would know exactly what kind of people they were. Vincent Castellano approached our table after they'd left, carrying a bottle of the restaurant's finest champagne. "Compliments of the house," he said quietly. "What you did tonight took tremendous courage. That kind of systematic deception damages entire communities when it goes unchallenged." Helena accepted the champagne with dignity, though I could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "Some accountability requires witnesses," she said. "Private confrontations allow people to minimize consequences and repeat patterns." As we sat in the suddenly peaceful restaurant, processing what had just occurred, I felt something shifting in my chest. The cold focus that had carried me through 3 weeks of investigation and planning was giving way to exhaustion and a strange sense of completion. "What happens next?" Edmund asked, his scholarly mind already moving toward practical considerations. "Marcus will find divorce attorneys who specialize in complex asset recovery," I said. "The offshore accounts will be frozen pending investigation. The structured payments to Zara will be examined by forensic accountants. Their romantic celebration just became the most expensive dinner of their lives." Helena reached across the table and squeezed my hand with maternal affection that hadn't been contaminated by her daughter's betrayal. "You could have handled this privately, spared us the knowledge of what Zara had become. Why did you include us?" The question deserved an honest answer. Because your love and trust were weaponized against me. You deserved the chance to hold your daughter accountable before she disappeared into whatever new life she and Marcus were planning. Vincent returned with dessert plates, his gesture of hospitality creating a moment of normalcy after the evening's emotional devastation. "The creme brulee is exceptional tonight. Perhaps a small celebration is appropriate." As we shared dessert in the restaurant where Marcus and Zara had planned to celebrate my ignorance, I realized that justice served publicly created a different kind of satisfaction than private revenge ever could. They would face consequences that extended far beyond legal or financial penalties. They would live with the knowledge that everyone who mattered had witnessed their complete moral failure. The woman who'd answered that wrong phone call would never have imagined herself capable of orchestrating such systematic accountability. But she'd learned that some betrayals were so complete, they required equally complete consequences, witnessed by everyone whose judgment would matter for the rest of their lives. 3 months later, I sat in the corner office that had once belonged to Marcus's dreams, watching the rain streak down floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased a city I no longer recognized as home. The Cascade Art Foundation had offered me a promotion to executive director after news of Marcus's systematic deception had spread through Portland's nonprofit community, creating opportunities I'd never imagined pursuing. The divorce proceedings had unfolded with the methodical precision that characterized everything in my post-betrayal life. Marcus's offshore accounts were frozen, the structured payments to Zara were categorized as marital asset dissipation, and his attempts to hide our shared wealth became additional evidence of his systematic deception. I'd received everything I was entitled to under Oregon law, plus punitive damages that reflected the scope of his financial planning for abandonment. But victory felt nothing like I'd imagined during those weeks of investigation and planning. The house we'd renovated together sat empty now, too filled with memories of the life I thought we were building to feel like home. I'd moved to a downtown apartment that was modern and efficient and completely devoid of emotional resonance. Every surface was clean, every room organized with the precision I'd learned during my transformation from trusting wife to strategic adversary. Helena and Edmund had kept their promise about family consequences. Zara had been essentially excommunicated from family gatherings, her academic career stalled by rumors about professional misconduct that made Portland's intellectual community wary of association. The monthly payments she'd accepted from Marcus were being examined by the university's ethics board, creating professional repercussions that would follow her for years. But the cost of their accountability had been devastating for Helena and Edmund as well. They'd lost their daughter, their faith in family relationships, and the innocent joy they'd found in welcoming people into their home. The family dinners that had been my sanctuary after my mother's death had ended completely, leaving all of us more isolated than we'd been before Marcus and Zara's betrayal. My phone rarely rang anymore. Friends who'd known Marcus and me as a couple struggled with how to maintain relationships that had been built around shared social activities. Dinner party invitations dried up as people wrestled with the social complexity of including the woman who'd orchestrated her husband's public humiliation, even if he'd deserved it. The professional success that had emerged from my personal devastation felt tainted by its origins. Every contract I signed, every board meeting I attended, every moment of respect I commanded was shadowed by the knowledge that I'd gained my position through destruction rather than merit. The executive who made decisions affecting hundreds of artists and community programs was built on the ruins of the woman who'd believed in love and trust and the possibility of genuine partnership. Camila visited from Seattle occasionally, bringing wine and worried observations about my transformation. "You got everything you wanted," she'd said during her last visit, "but I'm not sure you're happy about it." She was right. I'd achieved perfect justice through systematic planning and public accountability. Marcus and Zara had faced consequences that matched the scope of their crimes. But the woman who'd orchestrated their downfall felt like a stranger wearing my face, competent and successful, and fundamentally alone. Some victories cost more than defeats ever could. Some justice required becoming someone you'd never intended to be. The phone call that had changed everything 3 months ago had given me power, respect, and financial security while taking away my capacity for trust, love, and genuine connection with others. As evening settled over Portland's skyline, I wondered if the woman who'd answered that wrong number would recognize the person I'd become in pursuit of accountability that felt increasingly hollow with each passing day. The call came on a Tuesday evening in late November, exactly 9 months after that first devastating phone conversation that had changed everything. I was reviewing grant applications in my downtown apartment when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Isabel Moreau?" The voice was professional, unfamiliar, carrying the kind of careful neutrality that suggested official business. "Speaking." "This is Detective Sarah Chen with Portland Police. We need to discuss some threats that have been made against you. Are you available to meet tomorrow morning?" My blood went cold. What kind of threats? "Anonymous calls to your office suggesting that your treatment of Marcus Whitfield and Zara Blackwood was vindictive and disproportionate. The caller mentions specific details about your personal life that suggest someone with intimate knowledge of your situation." I set down my wine glass with hands that had learned not to tremble, though my chest felt tight with familiar dread. "What kind of details?" "Your daily routine, your work schedule, your home address, information that wouldn't be publicly available. We believe someone connected to Mr. Whitfield or Miss Blackwood may be attempting to intimidate you." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, Detective Chen explaining security protocols and asking questions about anyone who might hold grudges related to the very public destruction of Marcus and Zara's relationship. But my mind was already racing through implications that extended far beyond personal safety concerns. The methodical justice I'd orchestrated hadn't ended their story. It had simply created new chapters where I remained the villain in someone else's narrative of unfair persecution. The systematic accountability that had felt so satisfying during that confrontation at Le Jardin Noir had generated its own cycle of resentment and retaliation. After hanging up with Detective Chen, I poured another glass of wine and stood at my floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city where I'd built a new life on the ruins of the old one. The view was spectacular, the apartment was elegant, and my professional success was undeniable. But the woman reflected in the window looked tired and wary, someone who'd learned to expect threats rather than trust. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Some lessons work both ways. Sleep well, Isabel." I screenshot the message for Detective Chen and activated the security system that had become a necessary part of my new reality. The woman who'd answered that wrong phone call 9 months ago would never have imagined needing personal security measures or police protection from the consequences of seeking justice. But that woman had believed that accountability would bring closure, that exposing systematic deception would restore moral balance to a world that had been damaged by lies and betrayal. This woman understood that justice was a circular process, that victims could become perpetrators in someone else's story of grievance and revenge. The systematic planning that had destroyed Marcus and Zara's relationship had also created enemies who viewed my actions as the real crime requiring correction. As I prepared for bed in my secure apartment, surrounded by the symbols of victory that felt increasingly like evidence of transformation into someone I'd never wanted to become, I realized that the phone call that had started everything might have been just the beginning of a cycle that would define the rest of my life. Some prices are too high to pay, even for perfect revenge. Some victories create wars that never truly end. And some women who seek justice discover they've become the very thing they set out to destroy. The cycle was complete, but it was far from over.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.